It is episode 151 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News, and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. Fox pretends everyone loves Elon, even as voters scream they hate him.
Become one of your best friends. He's working for free for you. I've never seen anybody take as much as he's taken. I think you've proven they have no power anymore because they threw everything they had at you and they didn't win. They threw everything, lawfare, weaponization. Sure. And then the chief engineer, which was phenomenal. SpaceX, same thing, which is unbelievable. I mean, you were the first private company to send astronauts successfully into space, first private company to send astronauts into orbit. This is going to be hard. I feel like I'm interviewing two brothers here. And then you have something that really fascinated me. You might help the blind to see, yes, and people with spinal cord injuries. You're the richest man in the world. I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to do it anyway. You're doing all of these things, so yes, you're committed to helping the blind see, people with spinal cord injuries recover. Yes. You're committed to getting to Mars. You're committed to rescue. You're going to help rescue next month 2 astronauts that I think were abandoned. If I had the weight of the pressure of doing that successfully on my shoulders, I think I'd be, But when we spoke before we did this interview, you are very confident you're going to rescue astronauts, have the biggest electric vehicle company in the world. You really become a student of history, Mr. President. He brought this country to the dance. This is the opportunity, yes, to be transformational and to, yes, have, I would argue, the most consequential presidency, yes, if we really dig down and do something that had never been done before. And I pray to God this is successful. I really do. I wish you Godspeed. Yeah. Godspeed, John Glenn. You are really here because your heart and your passion is this. And you're sending ships up to Mars, spaceships up in the sky all the time and saving astronauts. That's pretty big.
That's peanuts compared to what we're talking.
You do all these nice things for people for free. You're trying to solve, blindness. You're going to rescue astronauts. You help the people in North Carolina, California. You guys are really friends. I could see you kicking up your shoes.
Well, he doesn't.
So that is an edit of Sean Hannity interviewing President Donald J. Trump with Elon Musk at the same time. And this was this big, we're going to have this exclusive joint interview with these two men. And they hyped it up, and Hannity did it on Tuesday and then showed a little bit on Wednesday, like it was this big deal. And that was just a sampling of his questions, which are outrageously fawning. And what inspired that is somebody who was actually MAGA, who is a big Trump fan, complained about Sean Hannity's interview questions and how long they were. And I went, you don't know Mr. Hannity. This is how he does it. Because they said, what if his questions was a minute long? And I'm like, only a minute? You haven't watched, you don't know the ways of Mr. Hannity. He'll go 2 minutes. He'll go 2 minutes in a question because he basically just tells you how to answer it, sets it up the whole 9 yards. So that was sort of a sampling. I went through the whole thing, and I actually timed how much each person talked, and Sean Hannity spoke about 30 seconds longer than Elon Musk. Now, Trump is going to talk. It takes nothing to get that man to talk. You can just go, water pressure, Panama Canal, shoes. I bet he could talk about shoes for 30 minutes. I bet he could. Toilet. How many times do you flush your toilet, sir? Hey, could you tell me a story about a time when somebody said to you, sir, could you do that? Could you do that, President Trump? You could ask him anything. You could just say college. I bet you'd get a story. I bet you could just, because it wouldn't be true. The story would not be true, but you could do it. You could just say, hey, bone spurs, talk about it, discuss, and he'd have a story for you. Hi, Odin. Odin just jumped on my lap. If you're new to the podcast, Odin is one of my cats. Tonight I was using my standing desk, and he was very upset that he couldn't get on my lap, so he tried to jump on my shoulders. He is way too big for that, so that was comical. So back to the podcast. Last week, the folks at Fox continued to elevate Elon Musk as a wildly popular champion of the American people while they proposed $5,000 Doge dividend checks issued to every adult American would not cause inflation. Crime, the economy, transgender athletes, DEI programs, the woke mind virus, border crossings, and mass deportations all took a back seat as the network became a Doge infomercial. Meanwhile, in town halls across the country organized by Republican members of Congress, angry constituents complained bitterly about the reckless, unelected billionaire who was destroying jobs and slashing important government programs. Sean Hannity repeatedly praised Donald J. Trump and Elon Musk in a joint two-part interview. As Hannity claimed they seemed like best friends or even brothers, the two men looked more like two dime store Bond villains who were ready to shove each other into a wood chipper the second the camera crew left the room. Anyone watching Fox News exclusively last week might have missed out on stories about increasing tensions between Israel and Hamas, a criminal indictment involving 6 prison guards in New York State, and Trump's failing approval ratings. Shows I covered last week were Fox and Friends, Jesse Watters Primetime, The Five, and Hannity I picked up Tuesday and Wednesday to get that Musk-Trump interview. I admit I was not seeing the love between Musk and Trump. I was not seeing the love. I was not. There was a lot of, he's great, he's amazing, but I wasn't feeling it. It felt very like, okay, I got to say this. And honestly, wood chipper, put it in the room, leave. Somebody slipped. Somebody slipped. We're going to have some Putin-esque. I hope not. Well, I mean, some people I don't really care. Some people I really wouldn't care. It's like, Elon Musk slipped into a wood chipper. I'd go, Hopefully his kids get his inheritance. Hopefully he didn't cut them out of the bazillion children he has with women he doesn't speak to. Hopefully they'll get his inheritance. I do hope they get something. Who knows with people like him? I don't want somebody falling out of a window, but I'm just saying that I'm a little worried that stuff like that could happen now that we're kind of Russia light. Anyway, that's Gallows humor, everybody, before anybody writes an angry letter at me going, you are saying people need to die in a wood chipper. Fargo, that's the reference. Anyway, it's a movie. It's dark. We live in dark times. Anyway, Gallows humor. So we're going to move on. This first clip is from Fox and Friends. Wednesday, I'm telling you, this was a Doge infomercial. I'm watching everything last week going, how am I going to make this into a podcast? Because it's just the same note, the same tone. It kind of is the same stuff they've done the past 2 weeks. It's just Doge. Isn't Elon Musk amazing? And then we're going to get to it. I got a gift from the universe. And I said, I finally figured this out. But this is from midweek, Fox and Friends. This is sort of a taste of how obnoxious this was. This entire week like this. Here we go.
Zero. All right. Well, somebody who's got some skin in the game would be Elon Musk.
Nice.
Wow. Right, exactly.
Steve, end the show here.
Good.
End the show here.
He has been asked by the president, as you know famously, to take a look at the federal government because the president has felt for years there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah. And last night, sitting down with Sean Hannity in an interview that I think they taped a couple of days ago, but it's really interesting. He actually, Elon Musk, revealed that in the total budget right now, they had identified about 1% in waste, fraud, and abuse. And ultimately, they think they could hit $1 trillion, which was the goal all along.
Yeah, so they're talking about a total savings of $55 billion.
So far, in one week.
Over 1,000 contracts
1 month, I should say, 1 month.
Have been canceled. And I think that the number is only going to go up, Ainsley.
Yeah, and he's even showing an interest in the idea of guaranteeing a $5,000 check to every American. It would be called the Doge dividend. They're saving a lot of money, and what I got out of this interview, and we're going to play a lot of clips for you this morning, is that it really humanized them. It showed that they really get along. It showed how
they're pals
and how much they love America. Donald Trump is a billionaire. He doesn't have to go through all the things he's been through over the last, 8 years. Elon Musk is working for free. He's a billionaire. He talked about his companies, and Neuralink can help the blind to see, spinal cord injuries, so that someone can walk again. I mean, this is incredible. It's cutting edge. He talked about the rocket, and for the first time, the rocket usually dumps in the ocean. But if they can catch it, like the baby, Donald Trump said, then that saves $1 billion.
It's more efficient.
It is.
I love.
So there they are pushing their whole, they're best friends. Look at how good they get along concept, which I'm not buying based on what I saw. Body language, everything. They just seemed like two people who were just like, ah. But yeah, okay, sure. They're best buddies and they're billionaires. They don't need any money. They just love the American people. And Trump would only be doing this because he was going to go to prison if he didn't become the president, which is how weird our life is. And Elon Musk only has, I don't know, billions and billions of dollars worth of contracts with the federal government, and he's dismantling the agencies that were investigating his companies. Let's leave that out, Fox. We got to leave that out because we just have to sell this whole Doge nonsense so people are okay with their friends getting fired. One of the things that's been interesting about this that I don't think anyone in the Trump administration anticipated is as they're cutting these jobs, the mentality was they were all DC people and like, you know, hardcore bureaucrats, when in reality, a lot of them are, you know, they have centers all over the country. So people are losing their jobs all over the country, and people know like their friends are losing their jobs, and park rangers and farmers are being affected. It's just much worse than, you know, bureaucrats, as they put it, the deep state, quote unquote, losing their jobs. So it's starting to affect people, and people are not liking it. So I looked into, the New York Times did a great article, some great investigative reporting. Again, people, there's plenty to criticize about their editorial decisions lately, but they still have great investigative reporting going on there. And they had a hard look into the public ledger for Doge, which is called the Wall of Receipts. So here's some stuff that the New York Times found, and I have a hyperlink in the newsletter if you want to check out the source. So some of the contracts were counted 2 or 3 times that Doge claims they cut. The ledger included programs that were ended during the Biden administration. Cancellations disproportionately affected businesses run by women and people of color. If a program had a total maximum ceiling for a budget of $100 million, but only spent $10 million, Doge is counting the savings as $90 million, even though only $10 million was spent with no plans to increase the amount. So Jessica Tarloff put it this way, like if you had a credit card with a maximum of $30,000 and you only had a $3,000 balance on it and you paid off the $3,000, you can't then say, well, I saved $27,000. It's not how it works. And that's sort of some of the goofy accounting techniques that they're doing over at Doge because they don't know what they're doing. They're also not accounting for termination costs incurred with some government contracts. So some government contracts, when you end the contract, you have to pay fees to help pay for equipment, to move an office, all kinds of stuff. They're not counting any of that. In one egregious case, Doge claimed that a $232 million savings for IT services to support the Social Security Administration ended up being closer to $560,000. Another expense for an $8 million contract for technical service for ICE was originally reported as $8 billion by Doge. That one got a lot of press, and they have since fixed it. But as mistakes have been pointed out in the press and changes made on the Doge Wall of Receipts, and that's what they call it, the total number of savings of $55 billion has remained the same, which that makes no sense. So the Times contacted a scientist, David Reed, in Michigan, who found a contract that he had worked on to study invasive species in the St. Lawrence Seaway that was included on Doge's list. Reed claimed the contract expired on December 31st, 2024, and he decided to retire and not renew it. Doge claimed it saved U.S. taxpayers $25,000 by ending that contract. So that's obviously not true, at least according to the person who actually had the contract. So without giving out too much personal information, I have a sibling who is an auditor. That is my sibling's job, and my sibling is a CPA. No kidding. It's not a joke. It's not something, it's not an entry-level job. You can't just pick up a government contract and figure it out and know where the money's being spent and all of that. You have to be a trained professional. For privacy reasons, I won't divulge any more information about my sibling, but yes, just crazy that Elon Musk is like, I got this. And teenagers, he has teenagers working on this. I'm like, hey, they're really smart. Yeah, but they lack something called life experience and work experience. So I'm sorry, I don't care if they're really smart. You can also be really smart and stupid at the same time because of that lack of other experience. We all know people like this. We know people who are walking brains who can't tie their shoes. Do you know what I'm talking about? I've known people like this. I know somebody who told me once, again, this person has a job that's sort of public, so I'm not going to say what he does for a living, but incredibly intelligent person, like frighteningly intelligent. And he said to me once, I couldn't even fathom how to sew a button. How could you do that? Sew a button onto something? I couldn't begin to figure that out. And I just stared at him like, what? Anyway, okay, moving on. There are people like that. That's why just being smart is not enough. There's more to it. You need more to it. And it terrifies me that a 19-year-old is doing anything close to cutting people's jobs, it's just insane. 19, that's a baby. Think about your average 19-year-old. If you have a child who's been 19, you know what I'm talking about. They're wonderful, beautiful humans, but 19 is just, they're just video games, dating, maybe playing basketball, or if they're, not into sports, they're doing some type of craft, or they're doing something creative, or they're going out with their friends, or they're just, that's the energy of a 19-year-old. Anyway, I can't even fathom that. So this is Sean Hannity bragging about how much everybody loves Elon Musk, and then I've got some deets for you. Got some specifics I'm going to lay down. Here we go.
Trump has been regularly polling in the mid-50s. Rasmussen this week had Musk at an approval rating of 55%, and all for good reason.
So what already makes that suspect is that Sean Hannity doesn't give you any more information. He just says 55% approval rating, Rasmussen polls. I always have difficulty saying that word. It sounds like Rasputin, which sometimes in the, the transcript, the computer hears Rasputin, which always cracks me up. But Rasmussen poll, 55%. Now, that polling company has a well-known right-wing bias, much like Quinnipiac, which you'll also hear that quite a bit on right-wing media. They love those two. There's a few of them. Trafalgar has another one that's very right-wing. So anyway, that was great. He just gives you one little bit of information, and I kind of wonder, is there more to this poll? I didn't even care because I know it's got a right-wing bent, but I didn't need to look it up because the very next day, the Washington Post published findings of a very comprehensive, I looked through the entire thing, and there's a link to the entire thing in the newsletter if you want to read it, of the Washington Post Ipsos poll, and that's spelled IPSOS, very well-respected polling company. Here we go, questions about Trump. 57% of Americans thought Trump had exceeded his authority since taking office. That's not a good number. 43% supported what the president had done during his first month in office. 48% oppose what the president has done so far. 37% strongly oppose Trump. 27% strongly support the president. 6 in 10 Americans oppose shutting down USAID. 53% approve of how Trump is handling the economy. 54% disapprove of how Trump is handling the federal government, and 54% think Democrats should control Congress in the next term to act as a check on Trump. So those are all bad numbers. So only 27% strongly support the president, while 37% strongly oppose Trump. These are not good numbers at all, especially this early in his term. Questions about Elon Musk. When asked, do you approve or disapprove of the job that Elon Musk is doing within the federal government? 21% strongly approve. 41% strongly disapprove. When asked, do you approve or disapprove of Musk shutting down federal government programs that he decides are unnecessary? 26% approve, 52% disapprove. When asked about how concerned they were about Musk getting access to some federal databases, here's how that breaks down. I broke down the whole list. 45% very concerned, 19% somewhat concerned, 16% not so concerned, 17% not at all concerned. So that's a overwhelming majority who are very concerned or somewhat concerned. That's bad. And then we have Gallup poll. The Gallup poll, incredibly well-respected polling company. They came out with the approval rating for Trump, and then they compared it to previous presidents where their approval rating was at this time during their presidency. So I'm going to compare Trump second term. Right now, he's at 45% approval rating. At the same time in his first term, he was at 40% approval rating. Now, to give an example, let's compare him to some other presidents. For whatever reason, Gallup, for presidents that had 2 terms, only included one number. And I'm just going to read the number, the year that they give. I'm not sure why they did that, but they gave, there's an average. It's included in the longer document. In Trump's well below average. So here we go. Biden was at 56% at this time in his presidency. Obama, 2009, 64%. G.W. Bush, 2001, 62%. Clinton, 1993, 51%. George H.W. Bush, 63%. Reagan, 1981, 55%. Carter, 1977, 71%. Nixon, 1969, 60%. Kennedy, 1961, 72%. And Eisenhower, 1953, 67%. And that chart also breaks down the percentage of Republicans that like these people, independents and Democrats. And Trump right now, this is the important number, I think, for Trump. Independents, 37%. That's low. He has 93% support among Republicans and 4% among Democrats. That's not surprising. But at this time in his presidency, President Biden had 12% of Republicans and 53% of independents and 96% of Democrats. So those are some stark differences there. So this next section is a collection of town halls that I found on YouTube where constituents are screaming about Doge to their Republican elected officials. So this first one is from a local NBC affiliate in Wisconsin that's called WTMJ TV NBC4. It's a short segment about angry constituents at a town hall organized by Representative Scott Fitzgerald. He won his last election with 64.5% of the vote. Now, brief note, I don't know how his district voted for president because in all 3 of these cases, they judge how a district votes for president based on a county. And many congressional districts cut up these counties. So you can't tell exactly who voted for whom. If you count counties, like, oh, here, this county voted red or this county voted blue, but then you cut the county up into 3 different congressional districts, so you can't figure it out. So that's a little confusing, but there's no way of knowing. But that's why I looked up that he won his vote with 64.5% of the vote. So that's a pretty good indicator that this is a Republican area, because that's not close at all. So here we go. Here's the clip. The first voice that you're going to hear is a constituent, and then you're going to hear the congressman.
There is no law, and there is no order, and there are no consequences. Nobody is held to account.
The end result of the fraud and abuse that has been discovered already.
Voters in West Bend expressing their frustrations today with their congressman, Republican Scott Fitzgerald.
Many are upset about cuts being made by the Trump administration and the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Elon Musk.
Now, those last 2 voices were Tom Durian and Susan Kim. They're both co-anchors of the local news program on NBC there. So next up, we have, this is from Morning Joe on MSNBC. The producers stuck this one in there. This one got a lot of play. I had so many examples of this one. I'm not sure why, but Representative Rich McCormick, he's congressperson from Georgia. This is part of the Atlanta suburbs. This is a very wealthy area. He won his seat by 64.9% of the vote. And again, this first voice that you're going to hear is a constituent, and then you're going to hear the congressman.
CDC workers working on the bird flu being fired by Doge and then having to be rehired when someone realizes, oh gosh, we need those people. Why is a supposedly conservative party taking such a radical and extremist and sloppy approach to this?
A lot of the work they do is duplicitous with AI. Once again, one of the problems we have.
So that's another example of the constituents getting so angry they're yelling over him he can't even speak. So this next one is also from a local NBC affiliate. The call numbers for this channel is WGBA-TV NBC 26. And this is a town hall organized by Representative Glenn Grothman. That's a Republican of Wisconsin again. He won his last election with 61.3% of the vote. Again, this is another Republican district, Republican-leaning district. So this is kind of a wonky clip, but again, I'm trying to get across this anger that you're hearing from the crowd. It starts with a question, very quick question from a constituent, and then you're going to hear the congressman talk, and you're going to hear the crowd again. It's kind of the same pattern. Here we go.
Is not creating any more money in our government.
I think as you reduce taxes, it incentivizes more people to work.
Grothman expressed his support for President Donald Trump's administration and executive orders.
President Trump has issued a lot of executive orders. I think by and large this is moving very quickly compared to other administrations, and I think across the board he's done some very good things. I think
many at the meeting disagreed, demanding Grothman to push back at the president.
Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job! Do your job!
My apologies for the wonkiness of the audio on that clip. It's very dramatically like too loud and then too soft and then too loud and too soft. I've adjusted it to try to even it out a little bit. The original is much worse, but local news has no time to put these things together. I mean, they literally tape it and immediately put it on air. So they did a great job. I'm not dissing them. They're under tremendous constraints. Anything you see on local news, know that there was not a lot of time put into it because they just don't have the time. It just goes up immediately. So I just want to say very quickly, the voice that you heard, the commentator, the correspondent you heard is named Ezekiel Telemaco. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing his last name. They kept calling him Zeke, so he also goes by Zeke. But Ezekiel Telemaco did a great job with that segment. That was entertaining. Now, one could argue that, well, Democrats flooded those town halls, the Democrats in those districts. And of course, that's probably true. But what does it say about the Republicans? Like, they don't seem to care. They're not showing up. So that says a lot about the tone of what's going on in the country right now. And I would say that that is more support for the Gallup poll and the ISPO poll that show that President Trump is not very popular. People generally don't like chaos. And he brings chaos because he's like a bratty child who's just screaming all the time for attention and everything. And it's hard. This is going to be hard. We're just in for this. I take it day by day. I say this kind of like, again, Gallows humor. Day by day, I get up every day and just say, we got to make the donuts. That is an old Dunkin' Donuts commercial reference. If you're of a certain age, you know the reference. You just go, got to make the donuts. Got to make the donuts. And it was this, kind of kind of nerdy looking guy. And he'd get up and he'd put his little uniform on and he'd go make the donuts. And I tell myself that every day, got to make the donuts. Got to make the donuts. So because ignoring it's not going to make it go away. So I doing my best here. So before I go to the next section, I should give a shout out to my sponsor. And that sponsor is, I'm 100% crowdsourced, meaning I have no large donor, I have no large sponsor, I have no benefactor, no grant, no foundation, nothing. It's hundreds of people saying they believe in Decoding Fox News and pledging $5 a month. That's how much it is on Substack. $55 for the year. I have a founders thing that Substack does. Founding members for $168 That's another membership. You can also sponsor Decoding Fox News over at Patreon. And you're not just giving to charity. Anybody who's a paid subscriber, paid supporter gets exclusive content lately. It's been these crazy edits that I've been doing of these insanely long congressional hearings or Senate hearings for Trump cabinet members. I have a couple more coming up. I went ahead and decided to do, it's really old, but I thought it'd be interesting to look at the Russell Vogt one. He's the Project 2025 mastermind. Interesting to look through his Senate confirmation. And I also am going through the Doge congressional hearing. That's in the House. That's like halfway done. So those will be coming up soon. And that's again for exclusive, that's the exclusive content. It varies from week to week what I can put out, but that's what I'm going to be putting out. I want to give a shout out to everybody who gave a good review for Decoding Fox News on Apple Podcasts. I saw them. I got so excited. Somebody mentioned the cats. Tip of the hat for mentioning the cats. And that person asked about the theme song. And I get questions about the theme song all the time for Decoding Fox News. It is from, I hate to tell people this because it's so anticlimactic. I bought it from a company that sells songs for podcasts called Premium Beat. And the name of the song is Eat Your Heart Out. And the reason why I picked it, I almost picked a song with an accordion in it because I play the accordion. But the reason why I picked it is because of the line, "Welcome to my one-woman show." And that's what this is. That's what this is. One of my favorite reviews of all time, because it's a bad review and it just made me laugh, was somebody, I talked about this last week, said, I love the content, but I hate the host. And I thought, oh, little do you know. There's no boss, buddy. There's no boss. I'm the boss. I wrote the content. I write the content. I cut the audio clips. I cut the video clips. I watch crazy amounts of Fox News. I do everything. I write the newsletter. I'm like, wow. And yeah, so yeah, I don't know who you're talking to, but the content is the host. It's one and the same. Maybe the person just likes Fox and it's a fake review. You know, I'm going to be a target for them. That's why it's because I rip on Fox. So Fox lovers are like, how dare you? So if you can give a good review to Decoding Fox News, it's always welcome. And if you can't become a financial supporter, the best way to help out the project is to share the newsletter, share the podcast. That helps tremendously. So next up, this one cracked me up because there's this like 24-hour conversion that happened on the 5. So this first clip is from Wednesday, where Jesse Waters was the lone voice saying that he thought Doge dividend checks were a great idea. Now, those have been mentioned a little bit throughout the podcast so far. And that's this cockamamie. I think it's a terrible idea. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's just a lie to get people to support Doge. This idea that the government's going to give each adult American $5,000 if they find enough in savings. That's lunacy for a number of reasons. And again, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a lie. But here's Jesse Waters, the lone voice, being excited about it while his co-host shout him down. Again, this is a Wednesday, and you're going to see a very stark difference between Wednesday and Thursday for some reason. Here we go.
We want bigger dividend Doge check rebates. I don't want to pay down the debt. Put it back into the economy. This is an electoral win. The more Doge cuts, the bigger the dividend checks. We remember how popular the stimmy checks were. And those were printing money.
But you just said,
these are rebates.
What about
no, we don't want rebates.
Yeah.
Doge isn't Robin Hood.
I want rebates.
No,
the voters want rebates.
No, but you don't. The government is not it is not a piggy bank. The whole point of Doge is to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. It's not, hey, we want to shrink government. You're not shrinking government if you're
giving money back to the taxpayer.
Okay.
Yeah, we can pay down the debt when we grow the economy from higher revenues that the rebate checks are going to generate.
No.
That's what tax cuts do.
But
That's exactly what tax cuts do.
You just argued about too much money chasing too few goods, which cause more inflation.
You're printing money to cause inflation.
What?
Not here. You're printing nothing.
So yeah, so you can just to emphasize this, they're all saying no. Greg Gutfeld's trying to yell over him. They're all just like, have you lost your mind? We don't want another stimulus check. And I can honestly say this is one of the very few times I've agreed with the majority of the people on the 5, I'm like going, yeah, I think this is a bad idea. So just get that in your head. That's what you just heard. Now, this is 24 hours later, same show. Here we go.
It does. The $5,000 checks, I love the idea. I think you should only send it to people who earn less than $150,000 a year. Sending $5,000 to a multimillionaire here in New York, or Boston, or Philadelphia, or New Jersey, when we should be paying down our debt, that to me is a bigger priority than all.
I like the idea of giving $5,000 to everybody, not because I want it or don't want it, but let's do something across the board for everybody, and let's cut down on the debt.
Dividend is not right, but it's persuasive.
Yeah.
You know, Doge wasn't
Well
supposed
said.
to be Robin Hood, but everybody loves Robin Hood, especially if he's robbing on behalf of you. And Trump understands, hey, if the government's been ripping you off and giving it to cronies, maybe it's time we get in on the action. Trump is like, the dividend will keep supporters so you can continue with Doge after Trump. It's a bribe.
And this is one of the, just, I don't know if it's ever happened, but yes, I agree with Greg Gutfeld. It's a bribe. It's a bribe. And I don't think the bribe's ever going to get paid out. They'll have excuses. Oh, we'll do it later. We're delaying it. All of this. He's a one-termer. He's a one-term president. He's going to probably try to run for another term. I don't doubt. If he survives, he's an old man. He's not in good health. He eats garbage. Who knows? He had 4 siblings. There's only 2 left. There was 5 kids. There's only 2 left, him and a sister. He had a sister and a brother die kind of suddenly, without a lot of warning. So who knows? Who knows how much longer he will be on this earth? He is a mortal human. I say this to myself again every day. He is mortal and of this earth. He is mortal and of this earth. We all meet our maker one day. I'm not saying I wish it. I'm just saying he is mortal. Meaning he's not going to live forever. But anyway, because he's a one-termer, I could see him bluffing this thing until he leaves office. And then it's like, oh, but I meant it. It just didn't happen because, and they'll blame the Democrats. I think it's a terrible idea for a number of reasons. But what would, and oh, just very briefly, Dana Perino, I didn't include her in that clip because she kind of held firm. And I'm like, tip of the hat, Dana Perino, because I think this is a nutty idea. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the government would ever give us $5,000 each. We can't afford it. We're deep, deep, deep in debt. I don't care how much we'd save from any cuts. We should be putting that all towards the debt, especially to help shore up things like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, all of that. But would Doge checks cause inflation? And here's my little paragraph on that. Generally speaking, on any topic, if I asked 10 economists a question, I might get 11 opinions. Economics is always a bit mercurial, much like the human beings who are part of any economy. And this is true. We talked to a lot of economists when I was in grad school because I was a business concentration. And it's just it's kind of like meteorology. And I also have a relative who's a meteorologist. I don't know if he's listening to the podcast, this episode, but he is a supporter of Decoding Fox News. One of the things that he told me when I was a little kid and I was doing like a project for school, he said, a good meteorologist is right 2/3 of the time. Imagine having a job where you can be wrong 1/3 of the time. Weather is just weird. They can only predict so much because things happen and things shift. And so you think a storm's going to be big and it's not. You think a storm's going to go one direction. It doesn't. Yada, yada. Economics is similar. And during COVID, briefly, we had one of the economists came into my class and I just could not forget this. He said, this is a science experiment. Or he was calling in actually. He goes, what we're dealing with this recovery and the economy right now has never happened before. We don't understand it. We're holding on for dear life. It's just not, we didn't go to school for this. Like, oh, there's going to be this huge, horrible pandemic. People are going to have to, entire industries are going to be shut down, but not the entire economy, just parts of the economy. And then we're going to rev it up too quickly. We're going to have not enough refinery capacity. So gasoline's going to become very expensive. And then the supply chain's going to completely melt down. And the prices of everything are going to go up. We can't get superconductor chips for cars. For like 2 years, we had to wait for those. And that's going to cause problems. And then, yeah. Okay, so anyway, this is my little paragraph again. So some economists think that giving every adult American $5,000 at around the same time would heat the economy up too quickly, resulting in a dramatic rise in demands for goods and services. It could also create problems in the supply chain, which still exists from the COVID-19 pandemic. Major retailers would anticipate when Americans might get this surge in income and price their products accordingly, even offering special deals to try to lure as many new customers as possible. You know that would happen. Sending out checks could also increase the deficit, which would cause higher interest rates and inflation. On the flip side, some economists and analysts think that the dividend checks wouldn't spark inflation since the money has been moved from government expenditures to American consumers. The argument is based on borrowed money versus money that already exists in the economy. If Americans paid off their own debt or put their checks into savings account, there would be a lesser chance of spiking inflation. Traditionally, Americans are notorious for spending money not saving it. The U.S. saving rate is much lower than most developed countries. It also seems counterintuitive to pay Americans $5,000 when the national debt is at a staggering $36 trillion. And rising, actually. It is disturbing how high our debt is. It is very, very disturbing. So the problem, my gut feeling, and I'm not an economist, but supply and demand doesn't go away. Just doesn't go away no matter where the money comes from, if it's borrowed or not. And if you all of a sudden put a bunch of cash into consumers' hands, because consumers spend it immediately, we tend to, I see a bunch of stuff, running out of stock, the price would go up. More supply chain issues. I do think that retailers and travel companies, and you name it, would come up with all these specials, and they'd even name it like stimulus check special, $5,000, tax included. Go to Jamaica or go, spend it on a, yard furniture set or something with a barbecue pit. I don't know. I don't buy anything. I live in a 450 square foot apartment. I do, which is sort of a joke that I say a lot because that there's an expectation that you're not listening to a podcast produced in a beautiful, gorgeous, fancy studio. This is a tiny apartment with a cat on my lap. Odin is actually crawling around on the back of my chair. He keeps trying to get on my shoulders like he did when he was little. He's way too big to do that. So this is he's done it a couple times tonight. It's been a bizarre night. I don't know what's wrong with him. I don't know what's up with him, but he's very excited. Very excited, Odin, the all-black cat. So next up, we have Lawrence Jones, and this was a record scratch moment. This is Thursday, first hour of Fox and Friends. He actually evokes COVID-19 when he talks about the stimulus checks, and I just went, "Oh, shut your mouth, shut your mouth," and you'll see why in a moment. But here's the clip.
I think people want tangibles. And they want to see the money in their pocket immediately because we feel left behind. A lot of folks have endured with COVID and all that. And so I think it would help the economy if people saw that money.
I like it too. A lot of people aren't watching the news. A lot of people don't even know that this is the conversation, that he's saving money. Most people are aware, but not everybody. But if you get a check in the mail and it's $5,000, that helps your family.
So this next is a series of clips. I went through my archives for 2022. I searched for the phrase stimulus checks and came up with this montage. It's various voices from various shows from 2022.
The White House is considering another round of stimulus checks.
Yeah, that's great for inflation.
Yeah. That'll make your dollar worth more.
And essentially what she's going to do is she's going to push Joe's $1.2 trillion stimulus plan, which many blame for high prices.
Bezos jumped in and said, in fact, the administration has tried hard to inject even more stimulus into an already overinflated inflationary economy, and only Joe Manchin of West Virginia, saved them from themselves.
And Morgan Stanley came out yesterday and very specifically said that the 40-year highs in inflation are due to the American Rescue Plan and excess stimulus. And that's what Larry Summers was saying for a long time.
That Federal Reserve Bank, I believe, attributed those percentage points of inflation to the $1.9 trillion stimulus package passed by the Biden administration. So, look, there are a lot of contributing factors, including shutting down the supply chain. But according to that one analysis, right there, that spending package led to a big chunk of what we're experiencing right now. And receipts, why is inflation worse in the United States than it is across the globe?
because we had the worst combination monetary and fiscal stimulus. Combine those, that's more than $700 billion in additional spending, additional stimulus. So you're feeding the beast of inflation.
Biden's America, he's got a solution for the stimulus or for the inflation problem. I think he's going to give us another round of stimulus checks. Hey!
All right. The Fed predicted that the COVID stimulus alone is driving 30% of the current inflationary effects.
So that's a quick sampling of how much they demonized these stimulus checks. And this went on for years, really, until they still do it. So the folks at Fox seemed to be oblivious that the COVID stimulus money was inserted into the U.S. economy to avert an economic collapse. Every wealthy nation infused their economies with some form of stimulus to prevent affected industries from collapsing. If entire sectors of an economy failed, it would have a domino effect on other industries along with the banking system. Inflation was also a global problem caused in part by the war in Ukraine, which caused a spike in energy and food prices. The chaos involved with the pandemic also created major problems with the international supply chain that increased prices across the board. So this was no joke. It was, did we want another global depression or did we want inflation? And we took inflation over depression. It's hindsight is 2020. We had never gone through anything like that in ever, really. And because the Spanish flu was a totally different economy at the time. And honestly, we did have a high spike in inflation, but then after it started to drop, we were doing better than the rest of the world, which of course they leave out. So next up, stories Fox News ignored. Every week I compare the hours I've watched on Fox News to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list are stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. My source is the PBS NewsHour transcripts. Here we go. Updates in the Israel-Hamas war. The Israeli military says a drone strike killed the head of Hamas's military operations in Lebanon. The attack comes on the eve of an already extended deadline for Israel's withdrawal from the country, under the terms of the November ceasefire deal between Israel and Hezbollah. An Israeli official now says that forces will remain across 5 strategic locations beyond the deadline. Families of Israeli hostages marched to the Knesset in Jerusalem to mark 500 days since their loved ones were taken in the October 7 Hamas attacks. Some 70 Israeli hostages remain in captivity in Gaza. Of those, around half are believed to be dead, and more than 48,000 Palestinians have now been killed in Gaza since Israel launched its air and ground war there. That's according to Gaza's health ministry. The agency does not differentiate between military and civilian casualties. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, or UNRWA, says that Israeli forces raided 4 of its schools in East Jerusalem today and ordered them closed. At least 600 students and 30 staff were affected. Israel also said today it's surging troops to the Israeli-occupied West Bank after 3 empty buses exploded near Tel Aviv in an apparent attempted terrorist attack. No injuries were reported. PBS produced a segment about how cuts to USAID and other federal programs have negatively affected U.S. farmers. About 40% of the government's food assistance comes from American farms. Others say they're on the hook for contracts for renewable energy equipment that the government promised to help with. Native American activist Leonard Peltier was released from prison after former President Joe Biden commuted his life sentence. Peltier was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents in 1975, and the agency has long opposed his commutation. The 80-year-old has always maintained his innocence, and Native Americans widely believe he was a political prisoner. Fox did report on this story, but left out the context that PBS included about the controversy surrounding his conviction. PBS produced a segment about water management in California. President Donald J. Trump has made several false and inaccurate statements about how water is used throughout the state. PBS produced a segment about the history and current state of the Panama Canal. President Donald J. Trump has made several false and inaccurate statements about the number of American deaths involved in the creation of the canal. Trump has repeatedly made the claim that 30,000 Americans perished building the waterway, when the number is closer to 500 to 600. He has also left out important context about the billions of dollars Panama has spent improving and expanding the waterway. Andrew Lester, a white man who shot an unarmed black teenager, Ralph Yarl, has died, days after he pleaded guilty to second-degree assault. Yarl mistakenly knocked on Lester's door after he confused it for another home where he planned to pick up his younger siblings. Yarl survived the shooting and is now a freshman at Texas A&M University. Lester was 86 years old. No cause of death was given. In New York, 6 prison workers were indicted today for second-degree murder in the fatal beating of a handcuffed inmate. 4 others were charged with lesser crimes. Body cameras caught multiple officers beating 43-year-old Robert Brooks hours after he was transferred to Marcy Correctional Facility in December. He died the next day. In South Korea, embattled President Yoon Suk-yeol appeared in 2 different courts today for hearings related to his imposition of martial law last year. In the first, his legal team contested his arrest on rebellion charges. The second was the latest hearing in his ongoing impeachment trial. In Spain, the former head of the nation's soccer federation was found guilty of sexual assault for kissing a player without her consent. Luis Rubiales kissed Jenny Hermoso on the mouth after her team won the World Cup in 2023, but resigned a few weeks later amid fierce criticism. His lawyers argued that the kiss was consensual, and even if it wasn't, it shouldn't be considered sexual assault. Hermoso said in her testimony that the kiss, quote, stained one of the happiest days of my life. Nearly 1 in 10 U.S. adults identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or something other than heterosexual. That's according to results of a 2024 Gallup survey out today, which says that the share of the population is up by 2/3 since 2020. The trend is driven mostly by Generation Z, which Gallup defines as 18 to 27 years old. Nearly 1 in 4 identify as LGBTQ, and 1.3% identify as transgender, more than twice the number in 2020. In New York, Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, appeared in court for the first time since his arraignment on state murder and terror charges 2 months ago. His attorney said that there were search and seizure issues during Mangione's arrest outside the courthouse. She said a number of factors are complicating his right to a fair trial. A jury in western New York found Hedi Matar, the man who stabbed author Salman Rushdie, guilty of attempted murder. The 27-year-old from New Jersey gave no obvious reaction as he heard the verdict. Jurors deliberated for less than 2 hours. Matar faces up to 25 years in prison. PBS produced a segment about Trump administration's termination of federal workers and contractors involved with the national parks. PBS spoke to experts and terminated employees about what the cuts might mean for safety and search and rescue operations for visitors to the national parks. President Trump's poll numbers appear to be falling. New polls from CNN and the Washington Post show a majority of Americans say he's overstepped his presidential authority and hasn't done enough to address high prices. One of Oklahoma's most influential politicians, David Boren, has died. He made waves in his home state in 1974 when he became the youngest governor in the country at age 33. 4 years later, the Democrat won a seat in the U.S. Senate, where he was instrumental in shaping U.S. national intelligence. Midway through his 3rd term, he resigned to become president of the University of Oklahoma. David Boren retired in 2018, leaving the university after a sexual harassment probe. He denied wrongdoing, and there were never any charges nor litigation. At the time, his lawyer described Boren as a dedicated public servant for more than 50 years. David Boren was 83 years old. And that's all the stories. There's always a lot of them. And we're moving on to By the Numbers, where I compare the top 5 topics on Fox News to the top 5 topics on PBS. Starting with Fox, here we go. Number 1, Doge, 39%. So that's like 40% of their airtime. It's Doge, 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 Doge. Trump worship, 11%. Democrats are terrible. These are actual categories that I come up with. 8%. 5% mass deportations, and 3% criticism of other media. That's some very important topics there. PBS NewsHour, top 5 topics for the week ending February 23rd, 2025. Doge, 17%. Ukraine war, kind of a big deal, 12%. State of the U.S. democracy, 11%. That's a series they're doing. They have conservatives and liberals and all kinds of different points of view in that series. 6% artist profile, and 4% Israel-Hamas war. Words used on Fox from last week. Here we go. Trump, 542. Elon Musk, 165. Doge, 103. Biden, 90. Border, 44. Israel, 35. Crime, 27. Ukraine, 25. Dividend, 23. Inflation, 19. JD Vance, 18. China, 16. Russia, 15. Jasmine Crockett, 12. Deportation, 10. And AOC, 6. Jasmine Crockett's the new it girl on Fox. Also, I think just next week I'm going to come up with a comparison so far of how many times they've mentioned Elon Musk compared to JD Vance, because I think that's going to be pretty stark. And that's the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to check out more of my work, you can find me at X, also known as Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, but not so much, and Substack, of course. And if you'd like to become a paid subscriber for Decoding Fox News, I could always use you. Go to my Substack for Decoding Fox News, Patreon for Decoding Fox News, share the newsletter, share the podcast, tell your friends. I'll eventually have merch of Odin and Thor. I don't know when. I have to find the time to make it. But anyway, Odin and Thor, the podcast mascots, send their love, and Odin would love to get on your shoulders and purr like he does. He's such a sweetheart. He loves everybody. You can also find a version of this podcast on the Resolute Square YouTube channel. Thank you for listening. I'll see you at the next podcast.
Resolute Square.